Okay, welcome. My name is David Pinto. I'm going to walk us through action cycles. A little bit of background. I was a maths teacher, interested in self-discipline, social organisation, metacognition, and I'd been working for 10 years in education, and I developed all these techniques and tools with a bunch of kids. But I didn't see the change required in the institution. So the institution of education, state school in the UK. So what I decided to do was to leave education and experience the world of work. And after 6 months of experiencing the world of work, in terms of engaging change makers in London, and various entrepreneurs and facilitators, change organisation facilitators, I realised that they didn't have what it is that I developed, and so I was working on trying to translate what I'd learned with students. And in fact, ABC State was the kind of solution I came for education to do with self-organising, which I talk about in another video. And so, but when it is in business, I had to formulate something different. And I came up with this thing called action cycles. Action cycles as in think tanks. And instead of a think tank and just thinking, and it's just, in a tank or perhaps the rolling kind of machinery kind, this was an action cycle. It was all to do with doing things. Okay, so it's a matter of iterating action. Okay, so action cycle. Okay, so that was the background. It took me 6 months to kind of develop it, I guess, and then it was a few months of trialing it in various places with considerable amount of success, I have to say. In the Cheyenne conference, that was the first one. Tuttle Club, Lean Business London meeting, Rewire London, London Creative Lab, Remade in Brixton, Facilitation Bar Camp, Thinking Hotel, Scotland Colleges, Social Chain Institute. However, and if you actually go to the website, you can actually see how successful they were. They were on the whole successful, however, there was a bit missing. And the bit missing was, there wasn't a way to track the values that different people were contributing to, which means there was no continuity between action cycles, which means that there was no accountability, which means that people promised they would do things and they might not, and that would let down the team. And also there wasn't any money associated with it. I'm interested in self-organising systems, and the current economic system doesn't really deal with facilitation and the kind of network strategies and solutions that I've come up with. And that's why I could come up with them originally in school, because there's no actual financial transaction, at least amongst the kids and the teachers. Okay, the teachers are part of some kind of big financial structure, mostly hierarchical, positional, but that only expands the institutional power of adults into the social environment of students in a classroom. That is through the consummate system, basically punishment, punitive punishment. So, but there was no actually money flow within the student relationships, and therefore I was interested in authentic relationships being formed with the students and amongst the students themselves, and that's what ABC State was, and it seemed to work quite well with the kids. However, there doesn't seem to be an equivalent system like that with adults. Anyway, because of this, I developed this technique straight after I came out of schools, and it was like 10 years ago. Yes, we had a reasonable amount of success, people with tears in their eyes, and some remarkable things happened. However, as I say, there was elements missing, I thought, and that's why I didn't really push it. So I dropped it, moved on to other things, and developed Sqale. And Sqale is the economic and the value tracking system, which can, I think, is the bit that was missing, that can now support action cycles. So I'm going to be talking about what action cycles are, and you have an opportunity to see how they work, maybe why they work, and maybe you want to do them. Or if you have tried them, then this is a bit of information as to how they work and why I came up with them, and background knowledge, I guess. Is there anything else about the background? Can you think of anything? Make a note of it. Please put it in the comments. Can't think of anything. Right. So, for years, I've been carrying around the three cards. Three cards that represent and you can perform and play the game with just three cards. Okay. I wanted it simple enough. You know, I've been working with kids. You basically have to make sure everything works, and it has to be short enough that people can participate. Okay, so without much further ado, let's just get. Oh, one other thing. Action cycles is one that was my kind of first solution regarding business. Remember, before this, I hadn't really taken part in any kind of adult kind of organization. Not really. Maybe a couple of small things, but not much. And part of that time that I was exploring it, this was the first, and then started developing a tool, which eventually ended up with Sqale. But it was also to do with how do we do business, and this action cycle is one thing. But if we can work together in networks, and that's what Sqale enables, it opens up a completely different way of how we interact. Now, I go into that in Sqale a reasonable amount. I call it Confluence Collective or the Sqale Collective, and it's like the beginning of Twitter but with money flow. Okay, so imagine working with people in a network where people are contributing different things in different environments, and yet when money comes towards that network, it's distributed according to the values that people have been given across that network. So there's no actual company, it's just a network of people, and the money flow works accordingly. And in fact, if you look at Sqale, it's not even money. Okay, it's like a one-to-one relationship with money. It can be translated back into money, but it's actually more powerful than money. Okay, yeah. Okay, so with that much of an introduction, let's go into this. Right. So I wanted something really simple. Okay, simple enough that you can fit on the cards, and you can perform in an hour. Okay, because I realised that the problem was, like in classes and schools, collaboration. My first degree was social anthropology, and I was interested in how do people communicate, what's the problems. Solved stuff, I think, with kids in a classroom, then translating it out into the real world is tricky because adults are operating, well, an economic which doesn't really contribute towards collaboration. It's more to do with instructions and following orders. Kind of, you know, I mean, that's a really crude representation, but it has difficulty with collaboration, let's say. And it's usually organizational collaboration rather than just genuine collaboration amongst people. And even within companies and structures, there's, you know, people have positions and roles, and, you know, it gets tricky. It's kind of mechanized. So how can you get a bunch of people, all right, together in a room to collaborate, okay? And not only just to collaborate, but to get a degree of commitment amongst that group of people, such that when they leave that room and they have enough trust and faith in each other, they actually exercise that, execute various actions unilaterally to produce a result collectively within, I don't know, well, a week, a short time, so that they can actually see the result, all of them, after a short period of time. That was kind of what I wanted to do. It had to be something simple that people would see the results in an hour, and those results were so significant that they would actually move on these over, for example, a week unilaterally, resulting in a collective social effect afterwards. Okay, and the reason why I came up with that original structure is because in classrooms, that's what I did. Okay, I went into classrooms where the kids were just like, you know, a bit bonkers, you know, literally hanging from the rafters, not really wanting to be there, and I had to do something that involved getting their attention. It was to do with drawing attention to their attention and getting results very short period of time, like minutes, and then extending that to like 20 minutes solid work, to like an hour, and then weeks, and you know, months. But you have to have something that gets a result, a socially verifiable result, because believe me, if you do any kind of like supply work in inner city schools, if you do manage to engage the students, the adolescents in classes in any significant way, and it's quite exciting, it's inspiring, and they're loving it. If you're not careful, after about 2 weeks, they're bored of you. They are bored of you. So what you have to do is you have to do something that makes sure that they understand that the actual skills and the reason why it's all very exciting is because of them. Without a shadow of doubt, it's them. Okay, and that's what you do. If you're a facilitator, you're facilitating the skills and talents that we already have, like you and I already have, and bringing those to the fore, getting a social result. And since you've got like 30 people in a room, you're getting that kind of social result. It means that the learning is actually occurring in the class. And I call it the process folding back. And I kept on folding back to make sure that people realized it wasn't me, it was definitely them, and it definitely was. And because of that, you get this very positive effect happening, which can extend beyond like a honeymoon period of a few weeks. Okay? The result of that in education, the reason why I thought I could change the system, and it would change the system, is because we managed to get 25 weeks work in 5. 25 weeks syllabus work in 5, and there was an exam, and 21 students moved up a set, and 3 students moved up 2 sets. I mean, so I was like, wow, this is great. It's all about the social, guys. But trying to get the adults to pay attention was tricky. So I failed, came into business, and realized I understand why it's difficult for adults to get this, because the adult structures are tricky. If we consider the other solutions I've come up with, economic and flexible reading, and have a look at the other ones, it reinforces this. So if you're looking at this thinking, whoa, is this actually possible? It definitely was, even back in 10 years ago. Okay, but now with these other systems involved, I think it's possible. Okay, with that shadow of doubt. And this is potentially, God, this is the longest introduction the world's ever given. So the problem with society is these hierarchies and silos and so on and so forth. And what this is meant to be a solution to get a bunch of people in a room together on a boundary of a company, or an organization, government, body, department, whatever. And effectively people communicate and ideas move between, and people act on the boundary of companies and organizations. Okay? So it works, I think, like an API for the equivalent of API for organizations. An API is a coding protocol which allows data to transfer between sites. So for example, that's why Facebook was managed to take over the world, is because it allowed API, and then people, other sites could plug into it and then allow their data to go in and out. So effectively the users could offer their services of games and so on and so forth within Facebook, and yet it was actually supplying data from other servers external to Facebook. Okay, so it allows this kind of transfer of data. Okay, but what we're doing with API is it allows the transfer of people and ideas and actions. Okay, and resources in effect. Kind of, you'll see. So that was the biggest, longest introduction by a human being ever heard on the planet. But we're giving ourselves time to do this. Okay, and of course, you can always just fast forward. Right, there are 3 cards. Okay, 3 cards, and I've been carrying these in my pocket for years. Never actually ever bring them out to actually use them, but I don't know, they fit in my pockets. Why not carry them around? There are 3 cards, they're quite old and scuffed, but you'll see some graphics put up here that will look nice and shiny. There's the green card, there's the yellow card, and there's the red card. Okay, I'm going to explain them as I do them. It's been a long time since I actually introduced this, so as you can tell, I'm always like, postponing the inevitable. Right, the first thing that's going to happen is the green card actually shows one side, it shows the ideal team. Ideal team consists of 3 hierarchical or vertical players, 3 horizontal players, and 3 diagonal players. What does that refer to? Well, if, so for example, when we worked with the university, what's it called, Scotland colleges, we asked for 3 people within that organisation to come to the meeting. Because normally what happens is you engage somebody in a lower echelon, and then you kind of come up with some kind of program or project or offering, maybe with them, even if you collaborate with them and co-create something, and then it moves up. Usually the person above has already accepted that, so then the person lower down works on it, then it moves up, and then eventually it pops up to a higher person who actually signs it off. Okay? Now, something like that. I mean, it's very basic, but that's why we have hierarchies, okay? And I wanted to cut through that. So all three needed to turn up on the same meeting on that same that hour, okay? And so you get so you need to have probably a connection with the highest person. Say, let's introduce an action cycle. They say, okay, fine. So because they're at the top, they've bring the other two, or maybe the middle person manages to persuade the person above them and can order the person below them to turn up. Okay, but that means that somebody has to know them to set up this action cycle, and that will be somebody in the horizontal players. And one of the horizontal players has the relationship with that, sets it up on this day, Friday, 11 o'clock, we're going to do this thing. Can you do that? They organize it internally, those three people turn up. Great. The horizontal player goes off and goes, right, okay, I would like to choose, and they choose two other players that they know. Okay, now this is not to do with hierarchy, it's more like consultants or life coaches or anybody that's playing around with horizontal structures, either work one-on-one or play around in a kind of more network kind of way, and they're actually good at this kind of thing. Okay, so they're not just working in a hierarchy. Okay, there's lots of people that talk about this and work on this, and lots of facilitators and consultants and so on and so forth. Right, you bring them in. Okay, so there's three horizontal players. They turn up on Friday at 11 o'clock or whatever. And before that, you also put it out to the network. There might be an extended network, or a Confluence Collective, or a Sqale network, or and you basically say, we're doing this thing, we're doing this meeting at what is it called, Scottish colleges. Anybody interested? And maybe somebody will come in from a university. Maybe somebody will come in from I don't know why they'd be interested in colleges, universities. Maybe somebody produces some kind of software for universities, colleges. Maybe a student, maybe a university student interested in organizational change. The point is, you don't know, and you kind of select. They kind of self-select, and eventually three people kind of self-select. You select, or one of the horizontal players selects, and they turn up. Okay, they're invited, and they turn up. And the reason why they're called diagonal players is because you don't know their roles. They could be the head of something. They could be, higher level, hierarchically. It could be a political person. Okay, it could be somebody in a department. It could be, it could be another college. It could be, somebody who sits in a college, university. It could be. And so that's why you don't know if it's high. You don't know if they're just a student. You don't know if it's a kid. It could be a kid. What do you mean you don't know? We do know. Okay, but the point is, they're diagonal players to indicate you don't know. It's open. That's what I'm trying to say. It's open to higher levels, lower levels, mid levels, so it's diagonal players. And a mixture of different organisations. But they're interested in this case, Scotland colleges, but if it was in IBM, it would be IBM. If it was, and whatever it is that the company is that people are interested, if it was Google, some people go, oh, I'd like to go to Google. Okay, great. And we're going to do this action cycle. Now, and then you give them, okay, so you get everybody turns up, 11 o'clock, hello, fantastic. Now, you have to stop with anything that slows things down, because we have an hour. You have an hour to do something. And I'm about to explain what that is. So you can't say, right, let's introduce ourselves, take forever. You've got all these players. Yes, the three vertical players know each other. Everybody else, explanations, it'll take forever. So you just have to say my name, basically, and that's about it. One sentence, half a sentence. Everybody's in the room. Go. Question here we go. So you start off with this question: what can be done by next week? You're invited to a uniquely assembled team, and what you have to do: what can be done by next week? And you have to achieve 3 wows. Well, we're trying to achieve 3 wows. The first wow is consensus. Consensus on a just beyond realistic objective. Okay, a just beyond realistic objective. If it's realistic to you, then you're not going to be inspired to act on it. And also, if it's realistic to you, it means that it can be done with the resources that you're aware of and you have access to. So it has to be beyond realistic, not miles. It's not sort of, well, next week we're going to land on the moon. Unless you're part of the Chinese program or the the American program or some what is it? I think the Arabs have got some kind of program. It might be possible by next week to go to the moon because they've actually they've got a rocket going up there. Okay, we're not talking about that. Unless we're doing an organisation like that, if we're doing Scottish colleges or Google. No, I don't think Google have got plans to go to the moon. Okay, it's not going to be possible. Okay, we're not talking about ludicrous realistic. We're talking about, wow, I mean, if that happened, that would be amazing. You can't quite believe that that could happen. Okay, but it's just beyond realistic. So that's the first one, and that's by consensus. Everybody goes, whoa, if that happened, that would be amazing. Right. When I'm describing this, I'm going into a little bit more detail. Usually, you just say that kind of statement, people go, okay, and then you just carry on. Right. But I'm doing it a little bit. Or maybe I should read it quickly, and then we'll go back to it. Right. Second one, consensus on commitment. Everybody, and I mean everybody, has to go, let's do it. So the first wow is, if that happened by next week, that would be amazing. And the second commitment, within the hour, is, wow, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's all do it. Are we all going to do it? Are you going to do it? You're going to do it? Let's do it. I'm going to do it. Right, let's do it. Now you have to do that within the hour. And then the hour finishes. Everybody's very excited. And then the people in the company disperse into their company. The horizontal players disappear off. The diagonal players disappear off. And basically, you use whatever media of communication that's available to do the things that everybody's doing, accessing the resources that they have in their company or various organizations that everybody else is in to achieve the objective that they've decided on. Right? And the third wow is you do it. It actually happens. At the end of a week, it happens. And everybody's like, wow, that happened. So they're called the three wows. First wow, second wow, third wow. Got it? Great. That's the green card. Okay. But wait a minute. How are we going to do this communication? Right. So I'm going to quickly go through this with the yellow card. There are some rules. Okay. To help us do this and make this decision collectively within an hour is going to be a little bit challenging for people. People may not think it's possible. So here are some rules, okay, or maybe guidelines. Now, the reason why we have a green card or a yellow card and a red card is that if anybody in the group breaks one of these rules as perceived by anybody else in the group, they lift up the yellow card. So all you need is one set of cards, okay, between everybody. But everybody could have their own set of cards. And if they go, that rule's yellow card. And then what happens is everybody has to be silent. No explanation as to why, just silence for 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. And then 30 seconds finished, you carry on. Now, you don't start talking about what happened and explanations. You don't have time for that. Everybody just mulls it over, blah, 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 and just carry on. It gets very, very exciting towards the end when you're really trying to get to the level of commitment and somebody puts up a yellow card and you're like, what the hell, we've only got like 5 minutes, what the hell, that's like eating into the time, that kind of thing. It's kind of fun. Now, if anybody, for whatever reason, breaks the rules or does something that really just repeating or whatever it is, red card. Anybody has the red card, put up the red card and it basically stops the action cycle. And that's it, it's over. That's it. It's over. Anybody has that power. Okay, great. So what are these yellow rules, guidelines? Okay, let's go around to these. Right. No judgment. These are 5, okay? No judgment, you assume genius or simplicity. No judgment. So you're not allowed to, well, it's not allowed. You can if you want to judge. But what we're trying to say is don't judge. Don't go, oh, that's not good. Don't do that. Don't go, blah. Basically assume that if you don't understand something or you disagree with it, just go, well, they're suggesting it, so they think it's a good thing. Or if I don't understand it, maybe it's genius. Okay. No splitting. Maintain unity. No splitting. That means that you cannot say, all right, we'll talk about that later. Okay. Don't do that. No politic of any kind. So you have to maintain the unity of this group and this hour. Okay. No brainstorming. A lot of people like to brainstorm. That's a khaki technique that when people are in a stagnant group and they know each other, let's brainstorm and come up with some rubbish. Okay, and a lot of rubbish that we see in the world is because people in companies have had to brainstorm to come up with another product or a variation because they're getting paid, so they have to come up with something. We're not interested in that. We're not interested in brainstorming where it's genuinely new. The 9 people in that room, or slightly more, slightly less, all those people in that room, it's a unique event. Okay, and there is something potential between all those people, And the time period of that day and that coming week, because of the events that are going on in the world, and the events in the company, and whatever's happening, that is unique, we're going to find it. Okay? So it's genuinely new. You're not trying to create something, it's genuinely new between the people in that room. Right? No pulling. You're not saying, oh, yes, I remember last year we tried to do something. Can't be bothered with that. Anything that pulls away from the people in the room. So any explanation that goes on a bit and pulls people's attention to something that basically, well, it's not that it's irrelevant, it's just don't have time for it. So you have to return the attention to the room as quickly as possible. You have to say something and then you bring it in. And the reason why you're saying this other thing is because you're bringing it in. Not to pull people away, but to bring people ideas and things in. Right, probably the most important one, and I think I used to start with this one, is no oppositional state. Okay, basically it's yes. Okay, so you're not going to say no, you literally can't say no. And try to avoid negatives like don't, can't, and so on and so forth. No oppositional state, yes, yes, and. Even if you disagree with it, you go, yes, and you say this other thing. Don't introduce whatever it is you're saying as an oppositional state, okay, because it's related, almost like to judgment. So, that's it. If anybody gets that, have a look at the card, kind of if you remember, and if anybody's going on about it, if it's too slow or too dull or whatever the hell it is, just go, wait a minute, is that one of the problems? Yes, it is, right, here's a yellow card. Boom, 30 seconds, we're all silent. If somebody keeps on going on and on and on and on, it's like, right, I'm bored, right, red card. You think, that's it really. Now the red card is basically to show, game's over, and it talks a little bit about, oh God, I can't even remember. I've never, does that respond to them, because show the self-discipline required to show next time, right, game is over, right. It's do not accept any payment given freely. Okay, that was before I came up with Sqale. So it's kind of like that. You don't think about money too much. This is a group, and this, right, that's it basically. Now, when we started this, when I did this thing, it's such a simple and elegant solution. And I've subsequently heard people talk about consensus, and, oh, you can't get consensus with adults, oh, it's very difficult, it takes forever. I was like, well, I had to do that in classrooms, so it's kind of like, how do you encourage that happening in a group? And this is the game, okay? Basically, it's a short amount of time, and there's genuinely something interesting amongst a bunch of people that turn up for the first time. There's something just genuinely interesting. So, various things that have happened that I remember. I can't remember the actual content of these things. Well, okay, I'll remember the one. That is the Scottish colleges. What happened was, and what generally happens is that people go, everybody kind of looks at each other. And that's what the horizontal players might do, is they might start going, right, I've been through a couple of these before. So they start suggesting things. Is there any kind of like pain points in the company, anything like that? Somebody might mention something. Okay, so have you seen anything, in the world that might be relevant to us, that might, could do with some result? Somebody says something. And you're spending a little bit of time, maybe 20 minutes, as much as possible. There's no defined period. But basically getting people to contribute different things, okay? So it's quite an opportunity for the people lower down in a hierarchy to actually say things that perhaps, somebody 2 steps up haven't quite heard, okay? So they can kind of say, whoa, this problem is kind of like a bit of a nightmare. Or the diagonal players might have something in their companies that they would love to have the resources of IBM, whatever the company is, or, Scottish colleges taking part, in schools, or maybe in their university, or whatever, all right? And so different things kind of like pop out. Sometimes it's like kind of interesting, and it's, oh, that's quite interesting. And there's a little bit of a rise for 1 or 2 people. And other people, oh, that'd be good. Oh, and there's a little bit of coming together to align to a couple of things. The horizontal players are there to make sure they're participating. Okay, they're participating, but they're facilitating as well. But they're horizontal players, so they've done these things before, basically. And they're like, okay, I hear this, I hear that, okay, that's pretty good. But it'll be little clumps, okay? The best way that I got as a metaphor for it was like, you've heard of anybody that's watching this has heard of this, right? Back then, it was quite new. It was before everybody kind of had heard of this kind of thing. It was like murmuration, okay? Murmuration, I've been interested in that because it's multi-agent modeling. It's by Reynolds in 1987, I think it was. And basically he worked out what was the mathematics for simulating a flock. Okay, a flock, you know, swarm, moving around. And it's quite simple. Okay, there are like 3 principles. And it's nothing to do with birds. It's got nothing to do with, you know, gravity and wings, or, you know, there's so many things that you can try to simulate about a bunch of birds flocking, and you have to simulate gravity and everything else. None of that, all right? It's to do with orientation to neighbors, and that's it. Orientation with neighbors. Okay, I can't. Okay, do I want to go into it? No, I'm not going to go into it. All right, I'll talk about that somewhere else. Okay. And the point is, and that's what I did with kids in classrooms, it was something to do with the relationship to the whole group, themselves, each other, and that's what ABC state was. And so there's something happening when a bunch of people start doing this, okay? There's a little bit swarming, but it's not swarming, because it's so short. It's the process before it gets into, the birds go into the air. Have you seen that? Yeah, not many people have seen that, or thought about that. All right, so what happens is there's a whole bunch of birds. They've all kind of like, you know, birds, a few landed, they're kind of on the wires, or they're on trees, and they're like, okay. And then a couple go up. Nobody else is with us, right? Another one. Another one. Oh, a few. No, not enough. Okay. And they all land. Okay, that's what happens. Till eventually there's like, and I don't think it's because, you know, alpha starling gets off. It might be. You know, there will, you know, a couple of them go up, they go, oh, you know, the master starling hasn't, you know, risen, hasn't deigned to lift up its arse into the air. No, it's I don't think it is to do with alpha starlings, if there are even such things as alpha starlings. Oh, actually. Right, okay, we're going to have to pause this.